Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now here on the Voice of College Football. I'm Greg Chris. Welcome to the show. On this show, of course, we like to try to reemphasize this each week. Our goal here is to, talk about things going on in the Mountaineer world today, and then try to reflect and relate that back to some past history. And we try to have guests on that can do that for us. We talk about a wide array of subjects. We have a wide array of subjects to talk about tonight. We talk about basketball, football. Tonight we're going to talk some conditioning. We try to cover just about all the bases if we can, and we hope that you guys will stick with us and enjoy the show. We think it's a good show, and we enjoy bringing it to you. We also want to remind you you can interact with the show at any time. You can get on. There's a link. You get on, and you can ask questions. You can make comments. Please feel free to do so. We like that interaction. It just makes our show better, and we like the questions and we like the comments. That makes our show so much better, and we appreciate all of you that do that. There are several of you, speaking of that do that on a consistent basis. Timothy Green, Kelly McCourt, some of those guys. We appreciate you guys weekly being on with us, and please do that. That's what we want. That's what the whole idea was behind this, to get a lot of interaction from the fan base and from people who like to watch this show and other shows just like it. I also want to remind you to like and subscribe on YouTube. Again, that helps us a ton if you do that. Make sure you tell your friends and neighbors and relatives that they need to like and subscribe, whether they watch or not. But I think if you watch, you enjoy. And again, please feel free to add all the feedback that you'd like. And again, we talked earlier about the fact that we like to cover a wide array of subjects, which brings me to my co-host coming in here in just a second, Frank Fear. Frank, welcome to the show.
Good to see you as always. I love your shirt. Beautiful.
I appreciate that. Yeah. This was a pre-cruise shirt. I went on a cruise this summer, and I said, I need some WVU gear to wear on that cruise so I can, it always starts a conversation. You always meet somebody on there that's a WVU fan, which I did, several of them. So that's where that came from. But anyway, Frank, I appreciate you coming in. I know that we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff going on in the NCAA and with the U.S. Congress. I know you're pretty well versed in that what's going on. I was going to use the word stuff. I try not to use that word unless I'm talking about a dunk. But I know you're pretty well versed on all that, and it's a pretty big issue right now. And I think based on our conversations with our past guests, this thing is going to come to a head here before long, and we're going to see some things moving fast, I think.
Oh, I think you're absolutely correct. I think it's just a matter of when and who. Obviously, the new NCAA president is very concerned and has brought new ideas to the table, a new proposal that may or may not ever see the light of day in terms of being adopted. It'll see the light of day, but whether it'll be adopted is a big question. And one of the things he's been doing is really encouraging Congress to act. So I think you got two avenues here, the NCAA themselves as an organization moving forward, or Congress. And one of the things I think that we've seen a lot of is conversation in Congress. I think generally in terms of regulating revenue-generating college sports, specifically NIL, name, image, and likeness. And a lot of that activity has been in Congress. I mean, whether our own Joe Manchin is one of the persons who's taken that to heart and has put together ideas in bill form. And there are others. Senator Booker is another one who's been very active in this. But the newest news is the activity out of the House of Representatives. There have been 11 hearings this year, or in the last year, I should say, on the matter of regulating college sports. But this is the first one that actually was connected to an actual bill that then was put forward by a committee for open discussion. Students, 3 students were there that spoke. The president of the NCAA, Charlie Baker, was there, as well as a variety of other, attorneys, college sports experts, et cetera, et cetera. And this has some teeth to it. And one of the things that's interesting about it, it has support from Congress people who aren't necessarily known for their interest and support of college sports. For example, Representative Dingell of Michigan. And so this one is really heavy in terms of regulating nil and making it more difficult to manipulate the nil process for partisan purposes. We all know that Florida State got whacked by the NCAA recently. The big issue, and I'll stop with this, Greg, is the NCAA has two items, neither of which is under consideration, as I understand it, in the bill. One is they wanted antitrust exemption. That's not in the bill. And the other thing they want is to make sure that students are not declared as employees, that students are to continue to be called student athletes. That's a really contentious one. So we'll have to see, but it's serious.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you mentioned the fact that, some of these Congress people are not tuned into the sports world a great deal, but are still involved in this. And I think that obviously is coming from constituents, people like us who are very interested and who are crying, hey, something has to be done about this mess. And I think they're hearing that, Joe Manchin, of course, again, you look at, from West Virginia's standpoint, that to me creates interest by Joe Manchin immediately. I mean, we're looking down the barrel of this thing, and we're not going to benefit greatly from the way it is right now. And I really think in order to level the playing field, they've got to do something. And you hate for Congress to get involved. You hate for them to be controlling. But there's got to be some sort of regulations. There's got to be some sort of rules in place. This is too big of a business, and it's too important to too many places for it to keep going like it is, where basically you're going to have 10 or 15 people that have everything, and then the rest of us are going to be fighting for the scraps. And they've got to do something. So I hope at least it's a step in the right direction. I don't know what all the proposals are. And we talked too with some of our guests about collective bargaining and those types of things that could be coming. We talked about the eligibility thing, how many years you get to play, and can you tell somebody, hey, you can only do this for 4 years. You're making money and you have the potential to make money, but we're only gonna let you do it for 4 years. That's another big question. We saw where the player from I believe it was Miami, like on a 9th year or something. I'm saying, gee whiz,
9th year.
Yeah. But Frank, when you look at it from the perspective of their perspective, and this guy's making money, obviously, and he has that opportunity to make that money, but he may not be good enough to go on to the next level to make money playing football. How fair is it to tell him you can only play 4 years, you can only make this much money? In our system, and a lot of folks will argue about the way our system is as far as economics is concerned, but they often argue to fit their, they argue in a sense to fit their argument, if you will. And that's that. If you look at that from a perspective I normally don't look at it from, he has a right to play and make as much money as he can. And it's hard to say, you can throw him out there after 4 years. So I don't know what's coming with Congress and what the answers are. I don't know the answers, obviously. But yeah, it's getting crazier by the day. And every day we I was going to say pick up the newspaper, we pick up our phone and there's something else coming at us. It's like, man alive, when's this going to stop? So
yeah. If I had $1 for every time I've seen the words Wild West applied to college sports, I'd be a millionaire. The other thing is this act, it has a title. It's called the Fair College Sports Act. You can Google that. It's 56 pages long. And as you said, Greg, one of the biggest issues, and I've talked with, and you have too, former players, regulation by the federal government is not a priority for most people. It's not for all of them that I've talked to. It's unanimous. But something has to be done. And if the NCAA can't do it, and you've heard me say this, I don't think it can do it because I don't think the conferences want to work together. I'm not even sure that conference schools within a conference are on the same page.
Right.
So something's got to give soon.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
monitor this and we'll see how it goes.
And I think, one more thing here before we move on. The show, the meeting you sent me the other day, that I only caught the end of it, but the gist of that is that the NCAA may be wanting these power conferences to, get out of the NCAA football wise and run themselves, because they know they can't control them. They know Congress is getting involved. They know they make all their money off of the March Madness. So
right.
they're wanting the football programs to go out, get away from us, basically
Right.
get out of the NCAA. So that's another angle, that we'll be looking at. I'm sure it's just a crazy, crazy time right now.
It is.
Really is.
It is. It is.
And it seems like it gets crazier by the day. Speaking of crazy, we got another guest to bring in here. He's our resident basketball specialist, and he's our expert. And we love having him on. He's been on the past several weeks with us. I guess every time a Mountaineers win a big game, we have to have Darryl back. But we got Darryl Prue back with us, and this basketball team. Watched them Saturday, and I'm like, my gosh, this team's got it going on. And then they go down to Florida, and you see what happens. So you get up and down, but Darryl, they're playing better. They're playing better.
Yeah, I think it starts with Simnick. I think he played well against Hunter Dickerson the last game, and they win. Then this game they don't get no paint, no points in the paint. They lose. You know what I mean? So I mean, we talk about paint touches, and when I talked to Hunter after the game on Saturday, the first thing he said, "I wish I'd have played defense better." So that was the thing there. You know what I mean? So
well, like a friend of mine once said, it's not rocket surgery.
Yeah, I mean, like
get it in there to him and let him score.
They talk about basketball, this new and old school and this and that. It's still defense, it's still offense, it's still making passes, it's still playing, defense, it's still rebounding. It's how you do it. Some people do it better than others. Some people don't. All they're doing is jacking up threes. It's just, that's not basketball. It's just people playing it. You know what I mean? So
that's right.
I think against UCF, the first 5 minutes of the game they lost.
Right.
They set the tone and couldn't bounce back from it.
Get back. Well, in the Kansas game, I thought some of the things we talked about before the Kansas game in their performance against Texas was, how well they moved the ball, how the intensity level was good, the defense was moving, rotating, doing all those good things that we had talked about, and they did the same thing against Kansas. And I know you will have some pointers, some things to point out as far as bullet points are concerned, as to what the keys to that game were, why we won like we won, and we beat a really, really, really good Kansas team. You can just watch them and see the things we were talking about. And when they're doing those things, they're a pretty good basketball team. But when they're not, they're pretty bad.
Yeah. Against Kansas, I don't think Kansas came to play. I just think
right.
I thought the way that the body language and everything, and me and Coach Catlett was in the stands talking too, is like, Bill Self-Grade, turn it up on him. He ready make him get angry. You know what I mean? And it never happened.
Yeah. Right.
So then they went and played Cincinnati, beat Cincinnati at Cincinnati. But you can't have some that you score them points and you get no points. You know what I mean? And
right.
Edie didn't score. Then you have Raekwon Battle, you averaging 19, you get 5. Kerr, you had a good game, you hit 3. The only bright spot was Joe Harris, with 15 off the bench. But he's not going to do that every game. He wasn't. He probably wasn't even on a scouting report, and they playing a little desperate. So, when you become a number 1 option, and you become a number 2 option, let's see how you score then. So somebody became a number 1 or number 2 option, and they clamped the defense around him. He didn't score. Battle, he didn't score. So somebody had to score. So they'll leave somebody up. They'll make their sacrifice, and he wasn't the guy that they thought was going to keep hitting shots. So it's it's consistency. You know, you got to be good to be good. You have to be consistent, and
Yeah.
you know, this team is going to
Yeah.
be consistent, like we said all the time.
Yep, they really struggle with that. Like you said, the consistency part of it is tough. And I don't know, I don't know if it's the chemistry thing. I don't know if it's where they haven't played together as much. I don't know what it is, but the consistency. I mean, you just watch them from one game to the next, and it's like watching a different team. I mean, it's not even close. It's not like, oh man, we just missed some shots. It's just like a whole different team out there playing. You watched last night. I mean, it was awful. They were bad.
It's just you know how it is. It's two different environments. You at home, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's just in you're away. It's two different things, and travel. But you know, playing together and stuff like that. It's we got guys from other places, so you get other guys' stuff. You know, I call it SHIT. So you get everybody else's. You know what I mean? So and the SHIT will come up eventually. And it comes up in those times when things not going well.
Right. Yeah, you hope that when we do go on the road. I mean, I don't know how good UCF really is, but you would hope when we go on the road that we could at least be respectable. And last night we weren't. But again, I think it's that like you said, somebody's got to step up, and the third guy that steps up may not always be the same guy. And I think that's another problem we have. And I think, I think that's going to get better. I've said all along, I think they're going to get better, and I think they have gotten a lot better. But they've got to get more consistent with their game. And I think even when you watch certain players, they may one game score 30, but they come out and they miss their first 7 shots. The next game, that's tough too. That's a consistency thing that you got to get. I mean, I'm not saying you got to score 30 every night, but if you're that type of scorer, you got to come in and you got to do your part. You got to score. If you're the scorer, you got to score, and that hurts them a little bit too. I think because they may be able to turn down to another guy, but I don't know that they have enough guys to turn to get that scoring.
They definitely don't. But at the end of the day, everything can't be threes. It's got to be them paint
Right.
touches. And UCF had a guy that will protect the rim. So it's not as easy when you're going in there and you're thinking about it. And then something didn't get going. He probably was getting his shot blocked. He was uncomfortable, and he's getting more. See, now he's getting more tape. Now you know how to guard him. You know what I mean? So it's he has to do something else. And I'm sure Johnny Dawkins is a really good coach. He's from this area. They probably watch some film and try to take away what's his strength. Where it looked like they try to take all the guys that were scoring and was doing well. They took away all their strengths and made other people be.
Yeah, they did a really good job of that. Yeah. And from your coaching and playing days, sometimes you'll have a player like that who, like you said, goes in and gets a shot blocked or something. They're done for the night. I'm not saying, but that's what happened.
He had all that adrenaline going, against Kansas, and and Hunter couldn't quite play the pick and roll and get back to his man, and he don't have that kind of athleticism to jump up there and get it, and Semick was putting that shoulder in his chest and knocking him off balance. So so now we didn't see him do that all year. Now all of a sudden he's doing it. That's okay. Now that's on the scouting report. So and stuff like that. So like you said, Greg, he got to do something different. So if he has to get better. I mean, now he has to go to another move. So nothing wrong with it. If you go to another move, you can always come back to your strong move.
Right. And wasn't that Mike Tyson said? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Oh yeah.
It's not rejected, man. They better have a plan B.
That was a great quote.
That's what got me. I kept watching. Kept thinking, "Come on, guys, get going." Frank, did you get an opportunity to watch those games?
I watched parts of each. I do subscribe to ESPN Plus, so that was an advantage. But I didn't see both fully. But what you guys described is right on target. I don't want to say that I'm a realist, but when you look at what this team started with and the circumstances, hey, I think they've exceeded expectations. Being able to beat Texas and Kansas at home for this team, I think is great. But I wasn't at all surprised to see what happened with UCF. As Darryl said, good coaching, man, good strategy. And we didn't play the center didn't come back. I thought our big guy would come back, and I noticed in the box score, because I looked to see if the part I didn't see right. Am I right? He didn't play at all, right?
No, he did not. No.
Yeah. So, step at a time, and play for the big, play as well as you can, shoot for the Big 12 tournament, see what happens.
Yeah, I think after watching them early, and then seeing them now, like I said, of course they got players back. They got some of these players. They have definitely improved, and they seem to be getting better. And those type of things happen. I don't know if they with this team, it seems like they kind of expect that to happen. You know what I mean? When they go on a road, that's what it looks like. And they got to get that out of their system and understand they're a good basketball team, but they got to play a certain way and do certain things in order to be successful. And they seem like they get away from that when they go on a road. And a lot of teams do that. I mean, you've seen that a lot with teams. And I just think they need to get that squared away. But I really I'm not too disappointed at all. You see some real bright spots and you see an improvement. I don't know what else you could ask for. That's the whole situation. That was a mess. And for somebody to have to come into the middle of that and do as well as they're doing, I think they're doing okay. And I think Frank, we're gonna keep Darryl in if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if y'all talk about. We're gonna keep Darryl in when we talk about the conditioning thing because we were going to talk about some basketball conditioning. And so I want to go ahead and get Mickey on here. And go ahead and leave Al in there. Mickey, of course, Mickey Plumley is back with us. Mickey, we welcome you back. Had some illness and some stuff going on, but we appreciate you and we're glad you're back.
Yeah, it was a tough early January for me, Greg, and it's great to be back. Sorry I missed the last couple of 3 shows with some illness, but you can't keep a Mountaineer down.
There you go. And of course, we've had Al on before. Al Johnson's on with us. We are going to talk about some strength and conditioning and that sort of thing. And you can see I was going to just getting ready to say that, but you can see on the bottom there the strength and conditioning coaches Hall of Fame. He served with WVU, Ohio State, East Tennessee State, Northwestern, and the Baltimore Orioles as their strength and conditioning guy. Darryl, I'm going to start with you. We are going to talk about this since we're in the off season. The strength and conditioning thing is something over the years that's just grown and grown, no pun intended, grown and become more important over the years. What was your off-season strength and conditioning program like when you played?
Al did most of it. We did a lot of running at the end and a lot of lifting. Back then, I think they wanted us to get bigger. You know what I mean? Strong, big, and stuff like that. We did some plyometrics after the season too. But back then we didn't have a lot of individual workouts as far as basketball. Like guys take us and work on something, our weaknesses, and some of the guys didn't like playing. So it'd be hard to get 10 guys to play. So we had to go down Stansbury and play. But a lot of those guys wasn't invested into it. So that's it's different now because they have the practice facility. Everybody's there. You can get you can get in there. But Al did a good job of keeping everybody healthy. I don't think we had no knee injuries, no, nothing serious. My 4 years there, and I took the base of what he taught us, and I took it and used it as a pro, and it helped me a lot throughout my career.
Yeah, and you probably also in your era dealt with because I remember this, and when I first started coaching, I heard this all the time. Well, you can't lift weights, during the season because it's going to mess up your shots. We always heard that,
we started getting into that a little bit. I don't think Catlett was sold on it my senior year, but it's not as like it is now. Right. Because they definitely left during the year more. But I think Al was trying to introduce it our senior year. But I don't think coach didn't like going up because we had to go back outside, you know what I mean, to go to another facility. So it's a little harder for us to go, go lift weights than.
Yeah, a little different. Yeah, a little different what it is today. Frank, I'm gonna let you jump in and Mickey and talk with Al about some of these things. I know just like Darryl said, today it's a little bit different what it was back in his era, back when I was coaching. When I was in high school and played football, we didn't even have weights. We had a machine that had trying to remember what it was called, but it had like shock absorber type things on it. And you lifted them and pulled them back and forth and that sort of thing. We didn't even have weights that we lifted, but times have obviously changed. Everybody's bigger, stronger, faster, and it's just become an integral part of every program. And I love listening to Al talk about these things because it's so important to a program now. Well, it's always been important, but it's more important now today than ever. So I'm going to quit talking so much and let you guys hash this out. I'm going to sit here and listen to you.
Well, Mickey did a great interview with the fellow footballer from back in the late 60s, Bob Zitelli, and we're going to show that video in a few minutes. But Al, you've worked at so many different places, made so many, I can't count the number of pro players, MLB, NFL, NBA that you've helped coach. How do you evaluate the current status of strength and conditioning, particularly in terms of the off-season work, and compare that to the years past?
Well, I tell you what, I think right now, now what's more prevalent probably in the last 5 to 7 years is there's a lot more science involved in terms of the training. There's a lot more emphasis, which there should be, on rest and recovery. Recovery. And I think through the years, I think back, 80s, 90s. More. We thought more was better. We push harder, we lift more, we run more, those type of things. And I think we've gotten smarter with the body in terms of just recovery because we feel that there's, like I say, there's a lot more thought goes into designing the program. It's more comprehensive now than it's ever been, as far as like Darryl alluded to, plyos, you're talking about developing a more explosive, powerful athlete. The biggest athlete doesn't always win the battle, but the one who, if you build, good core amount of strength and power, you got to change. It's confidence. It boils down to, it's still the athlete who's successful night in, night out is the one who's the strongest between their ears. It still boils down to the mental approach, the mental aptitude. Darryl mentioned last night's game. It's, Greg, you mentioned it. It's like two different teams. But you think, geez, how can you not play well on the road? You play well at home, and of course you got the home environment. But the part of it boils down to leadership. Whether it comes from the coaches or whether it comes from the players. Darryl was a prime example of an athlete who took great pride. He didn't care. He didn't care what gym he played in. He knew that the basket was 10 foot from the ground to the rim, and he came to play. And I think that with strength conditioning now, it's so much more. It's so much more more comprehensive. You're talking about speed, quickness, explosion, flexibility. You're talking about nutrition is a major component of training now, whereas 20, 30, 35 years ago, it wasn't. And, back even as much as 10 years ago, you couldn't give an athlete at the collegiate setting. I could give them bread or give them a bagel, but I couldn't give them peanut butter because it was excessive amount of protein that was mandated by the NCAA. So when I was here at East Tennessee State from 2014 to 21, I had 14, 15, and 16. I could get all the bread and the bagels I could carry from the grocery store, but I could not say, hey, here's some peanut butter to put on the bagel, which was idiotic, which is insane. But it's come a long ways.
Can I say one thing? So even with the meals and the nutrition and stuff, I go to the practice facility now. They got peanuts, candy bars, and stuff like that. At halftime we had Cokes, and sliced oranges.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a can of Cokes. So
Yeah.
the NCAA, when the NCAA came around, when we played in the NCAA, we were told not to drink too many Cokes because the caffeine reads up on the drug test. It's like how you gonna give it to us, but we gotta not drink it. And that kind of carried over into my life, and it kind of affected my get me diabetes because I drank. That's all I did was drink sodas up until 15, 20 years. So I got diabetes. Now I got to stop drinking soda. But like you said, it was just to eat all this pasta, eat all this stuff, and all the carbs, and it coated up with me. But it just I tell people now all the time, like even with the shoes they wear and stuff like that, how technology, how the conditioning and weightlifting has evolved. I was like, we was kind of like the guinea pigs. You know what I mean? Like they'll try this, try that to see what works, what didn't work, and this and that. And like he said, weights back then gave us confidence. I remember my freshman year. I don't remember this guy's name. He played at Duquesne. He whooped my tail. I couldn't get around him. He'd sealed me on nothing 4 feet from the basket. I couldn't get around him. He was scoring this and that. I said, you know what? I'm not going to let that happen again. You know what I mean? But that's the pride. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to let that happen to me again. And I use it on other people as I got older. But you know what I mean? I was like, man, he wasn't overly big, and I played against bigger guys, and he's just strong. He knew his angles. I was like, gosh, you know what I mean? I said, I want to be like that too. So, it's it wasn't bad. It was just different back then than it is now.
Yeah.
Darryl, I know Darryl probably don't remember this. Mickey probably does. Frank probably does, and Al probably does. Salt tablets and limited water. I don't know. That's what you used to. That's what it used to be when you practice.
The salt tablets for the cramps.
They wouldn't give any water. You get a little sick.
I never could figure that one out, Greg. They would be cramped up during summer ball. 2-day practices, you're out there in the afternoon, 90-degree heat, and you're having muscle cramps. Hey, here, take 15 of these salt tablets. It'll clear right up.
These guys run up and down for 1 minute, and they get water breaks. I mean, we'd be having 2-3 hour practices, and if Cali mad at us, we ain't getting no water breaks.
Yeah, today's hydration, right? We had our hydration protocols back in the 60s too, but it was a little bit different kind of hydration than I think the coaches would really want us to partake of. But we've gotten to rehydrate ourselves on the weekends, as Bob Zitelli and I mentioned in the tape that Frank's going to show here in a little while. The training table, quite frankly, was one of my favorite parts of being on scholarship because, you got 3 squares a day, buddy. And, coming out of the southern coal fields of West Virginia, that wasn't always the case in our household, but it was no limitation on what you wanted to eat and really heavy on the carbs. We would have pasta at every meal. Somebody asked me one time if I ever did steroids in college. And I said, well, the only steroids I ever used was anabolic pasta. We ate all the pasta you could digest. A lot of steak, a lot of protein, Canadian cheese soup, baked potatoes, and particularly on Thursday night before the game on Saturday, we really load up on the carbs on Thursday night. I don't know what the medical significance of that was, but as we'll see in the tape that Frank's going to roll here in a little bit, it was, no holds barred back in the 60s. And Frank, I did want to set the stage here for some of the regulations on off-season practices back in the 60s, late 60s when I played versus today's regulations. And I Googled NCAA bylaws, and I found Article 17, which details, what's required today in terms of playing on the field during the season and on practice sessions that you're allowed and not allowed to do, both in the season and out of the season. And Al, you might want to jump in on some of this information as well here, but I was surprised to learn, compared to back when, in 1967, you report 2 weeks before school starts, you're practicing twice a day, maybe 3 times a day. You're going 8-10 hours a day. And then you have skull sessions or mental practice sessions on learning all the offensive plays that we had to learn in the defensive scheme. So you invested a lot of time in it. And now the NCAA has regulated the amount of time that a college athlete can put into it in that Article 17. And it's called the 28 rule. So during the end season, the NCAA has limited controlled practice sessions to no more than 4 hours a day or 20 hours during a week in the season. Now, out of the season, it's limited to no more than 8 hours in the course of a week. Now, the key term here is one, the acronym is CARA, C-A-R-A, which stands for Countable Athletically Related Activities. So let's take, for example, off-season conditioning that we're talking about right now. You know, our program was primarily a weight training program and a running program, as Darryl mentioned. But we didn't use weights back in the day, as we talked in with the session with Bob that we'll play here in a few minutes. And we were more into agility training than we were heavy weight training. But that activity today, it's countable, and I think this might be an out for many schools. If you have a weight training session today in which there's a coach present and monitoring the activities that you're going through, then that activity is countable. But if the team gets together on its own and there's no coach there conducting the activities, there are no limits on any voluntary weightlifting activities that you want to do. So it wasn't uncommon, you know, back in the day that, you know, you get a memo or someone will whisper in your ear, hey, you know, officially, you know, we can only do so much here, but you're free to do all that you want to do, you know, on your own. You know, the one exception to that 28 rule was during spring practice, and now the NCAA in Article 17 has regulated that as well. I mean, we used to go Katie bar the door for 30 straight days, scrimmage 2 or 3 times a week, and then it all culminated in the blue gold game. But today, the NCAA has limited spring practice no more than a 34-day period. And in that 34 days, you can only have 15 on-field practice sessions in which there's contact, and only 12 of those 15 can involve on-field contact, including tackling. So, and of those 12, 8 of them you can tackle in, and 4 of them you can't. So, you know, there's a lot of regulations today. And by the way, you can't have more than 3 11-on-11 scrimmages during spring practice these days as well. So as you'll see in the discussion that Bob and I had with Frank yesterday that we taped, you know, things have changed dramatically from back in the day in terms of the NCAA. And I think a lot of this came about because of the advent of so many concussion injuries in collegiate sports as well as in the pro football league. And, you know, conditioning to make sure you're in the best possible shape you can be in. Nutrition, you know, back in the day, as you mentioned, Al, you know, not as much emphasis on that as probably today. I would guess every team probably has a nutritionist assigned to them that watches the diets of every athlete in every sport. So just thought I'd set the stage with some of that information, Frank. Hope that's not overkill, but some of the things that exist today.
No, that's great. Al, your response, and then we'll get into the video.
It's the thing that the way schools get around the 28 rule, especially the 8-hour rule in the off season, is that, you know, they have a cutoff time. Let's say I've got a group of athletes and we've trained 2 hours, for example. You know, they'll blow the whistle, or they'll stop and they'll say, from this point on, the rest of this workout is completely voluntary. Well, peer pressure, they're going to stay as long as you want them to stay in whatever activity you're doing, you know, because they don't want to look like the weak sisters of the poor walking out to leave or whatever, unless they got something academically. But it's definitely, you know, such that the thing with and what you mentioned, Mick, was an important point is, the voice, and I think it's a good thing, is I think that the student athlete has got more of a voice into not being abused in terms of too many hours, too much time, et cetera, training. And so it's the safety of the athlete is what they've really looked for. And it really promoted. In some ways, though, it's protected the weak. It's protected the weak. Those who maybe are not as motivated to work as hard. But I think it's all good. I think, it's, you look at football, for example, in those 8 hours, we can do weights, we can do conditioning, we can do film. With the other sports, you're talking about weights, conditioning, you're talking about what Darryl mentioned, which he didn't get a lot of, was skill development, where they're taking, one coach to 3 to 4 athletes at a time on the court. Those things have changed dramatically. I mean, where coaches can get more individual time, especially with basketball on the court. But now most schools have RDs, registered dietitians. They're sports dietitians. They're not clinical dietitians. And they have assistants. They may have 1 or 2 assistant dietitians. And so now there's a plethora of food and snacks that are available, and they track the athlete as far as like what they're taking in and they're eating. So they've got it.
Meeting that 20-hour requirement, in season, has got to be real difficult. I mean, there are a lot of non-countable activities that a student athlete puts in addition to just the on-field practice time. For example, during a regular season practice, you're at the stadium hour and a half before practice starts. You may have to get taped up, may have to get your ankles taped. If you have an injury, you may need to get some treatment, some whirlpool, or get some treatment from the trainer. And Phil Callicutt, who was our trainer, just did an exceptional job with all of us. He went on to Iowa or Indiana and a couple other schools, as well as the pros, and just did a fantastic job with all of us. But, you take an hour and a half getting ready for practice, and then practices on field typically in football last an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on, how upset you got your head coach with you. If things went well, you get out there an hour and a half, maybe. If not, you'd be looking at 2.5 hours. And then after practice, you got treatment again to take care of, it wasn't uncommon. I mean, after every practice, 40% of the team's in an ice tub for 20 or 30 minutes before you leave the building. Darryl, I know you can identify with what I'm talking about here. And then you go to the training table and, you have your dinner. And then one of the requirements, which is non-countable according to the NCAA regulations, is the amount of time you spend in study hall in the evenings. And Jim Carlin, Bobby Bowden had a rule that you were in study hall as a freshman. You would spend 3 hours a night in a supervised study hall environment, working on your homework, making sure you're getting your grades until you maintained a 2.75 or basically a C plus or B minus average. And until you got that average, that GPA up there to that point, you were going to be in study hall 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday. So that's another time commitment. I mean, Greg, we sat down and figured out one time, if you added up all the hours that we put into it, our scholarship, probably the pay rate was probably about $1.50 an hour back in the 1960s.
Yeah.
And Mick, you bring up a great point. Think about, okay, you're talking about back when you played in the 60s, and you're talking about how much time they put in. Compare that now. I'm getting NIL money. I'm getting $10,000 a month.
Oh, yeah.
And if I would complain or gripe, I would hope that somebody would choke me. Seriously.
Oh, yeah.
Look
what you're getting paid.
I got a story for you. So, like now, I know with Georgetown, we had them guys lift early in the morning. They go to class. In between class and practice, they have study hall early because we are practice in the evening. Sometimes we go like 3-4 hours and we have our training table. So it's hard for a guy to go at 9 or 10 o'clock to go to a study hall. So we try to keep them busy all day. One, to keep them out of trouble. When they got too much time on your hands, that's when stuff, you're on a college campus, stuff will get a little awry. So we wind back to that NIL. We lost somebody because somebody didn't want to go to study hall. Remember that at the beginning of the year? What's the guy that transferred? Jose Perez.
Perez.
Yeah,
Making $200,000, $300,000, and you don't want to go to study hall.
didn't want
I
to go
want to
study.
beat him up for not going to study hall. For $400,000 at 57 years old, 56 years old, I'll go to study hall right now.
Absolutely.
I would go to study. What about you, Al? For $400,000, you go to study hall?
That's
Hey.
great.
I'd go spend an extra hour there. But hey, you bring up something. Mickey, you brought up a great point, which you're talking about the countable hours. You're talking about 20 hours. I've been a couple places I've worked, and I'm not going to identify them on this podcast, but I've been there where practice would end. The head coach would bring the team up to talk to him about, hey, go eat, study hall, whatever. And then he would turn to the DFO, the director of football operations, and say, hey, how much time do we have left for meetings? And one place I was at, the DFO said, Coach, you got 9 minutes. So that means once they got off the field, got in the locker room, and got up to the meeting rooms, they had 9 minutes they could meet with the players. I mean, that's how – and that's extreme. What I'm saying is somebody counting. There's other places which we probably can't identify on this show that may say, hey, you're going to go, and go shower, go eat, and then you still got an hour and a half meeting with your position coach after that. So it's and that's every night, but it's insane.
And that doesn't even count the time you spend individually watching film, which every Sunday after we would Coach Carlin would have us all go to church together as a team. We rotated a different denomination every weekend. Right after that church experience was over, we go have lunch together at the student lair, the mountain lair there in Morgantown. And then we break into offensive units and defensive units, and you're watching 2.5 hours, 3 hours of film from the previous game, the day before. So it's just one of the reasons we want to do this segment, as a matter of fact, on the show is for, the average fan out there, sees what's happening with the NCAA football sport between Labor Day and, the NCAA championship game. But there's a lot more to it than that, folks. I mean, it's basically, 7 by 12, at least 365 days a year.
Yeah.
Frank, you've got that interview.
I can just get in here. I'm looking at our clock.
That's what I was going to say.
Thank you, Greg. We need to get into the video, and let me make this proposal. And this proposal is based on limitations that we have with the platform we're using. And so I've had to take the tape that Mickey and Bob made and cut it up. So what I'd like to do, I'll put Greg, Darryl, and Mickey in the locker room. I'm going to keep Al live. You're not going to see Al, but we're going to see the video. And then after each segment, Al, if you would comment on what Mickey and Bob have talked about, and then when we go through the various segments, then we'll all go back on the stage and have a closing conversation. Hope that's okay. We've got about 13, 14 minutes, and we're about 50 minutes through the program. So let me put everybody except Al in the back room. And here we go. Well, we're very, very pleased to have two of my friends, colleagues, compatriots here. Mickey obviously is a co-host of Mountaineer Locker Room, but we're very, very glad to have Bob Zitelli, who played football with Mick. Mick played football with Bob back in the day. And we're going to talk about something that is very relevant right now, a very timely thing in terms of the offseason, the conditioning. And we're going to take a then and now perspective, true to the title of our program, and talk about what conditioning, strength conditioning, off-season drills were like when these two guys played. And then we'll talk live more about the way it is now with Al Johnson. And so we're very, very pleased to have you here, Bob. I'm going to turn to Mickey to give an intro, and then we'll have a conversation about what happened after the season was over back in the day.
Great.
Thank you very much, Frank. Appreciate that. Bob, it's good seeing you again. My friend that's been just like yesterday, it seems like, in the middle of winter, while everybody else was staying warm and cozy in their homes and apartments. And I think most people probably thought that football players, with the season being over, were doing the same thing. But, couldn't be anything further from the truth. What the average fan may not be aware of is, once, if you're lucky enough to go to a bowl, once that entire experience is over with, you typically get maybe a week, 2 weeks into the first or second week of January. And then, unbeknownst to the average fan, the real work behind the scenes in the locker room begins with what's referred to as the winter conditioning program. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. The NCAA has a lot of regulations about now, but back in the day, I don't think we were governed by anything. It was just you better show up for your winter conditioning program and be there and do what's expected of you. So I thought we'd spend a little time here today just reminiscing about our experiences doing that. And Bob, certainly want to open it up for your comments about your recollections of how that whole process went.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and it's always great to see you, Mick. Frank, thank you for inviting me in today. And I look back at, when I got in Morgantown in our freshman class of 67, obviously things were much different, but I don't think from a coaching standpoint that it has changed much. There's some basic things that I don't believe will ever change, and that's discipline, accountability, and teamwork. So, the drills that we were doing, and as compared to what's going on today in, winter conditioning, I look at Coach Carlin and the coaches that we had, and they were recruiting a different type of athletes that would fit into their system. I think our biggest guy on the offensive line might have been 270 and Tim Horvat. I mean, I played guard, I was 238. So obviously the physical stature of the players has changed over the years. But when I look at that staff and the type of athletes that they were recruiting, and I come to a conclusion that if you prioritize speed, they were considered as Renaissance men because they were an outliner in the football world. Most of the other coaches, they wanted that bulk, they wanted that strength. And, the buzzwords are stronger, bigger, and faster. I think we were faster than most of the teams that we were played. Now, that bigness and that bulk and that strength remain to be seen. But I think the difference between us is what we were being coached during winter conditioning and through spring ball was, how are you going to react to adversity? So the drills that we were doing was also instilling in us mental toughness to be able to respond the way that we did in adversity to get us to a 10-1 record and a Peach Bowl win. Most of the teams we played against were bigger than us, but in the end, it was the final score. I think a lot of the drills that we were doing, lo and behold, underneath the bowels of Mountaineer Field, and in the the meeting room turned into a mat room. Did we have weights? Yeah, we had weights, but we didn't have a really a strength and conditioning coach or a diet that was designed specifically. We were happy to have 3 great meals.
Your thoughts about what Bob is saying there?
Well, I think it brings up some great points, some things that, you're still working today. You're trying to create your culture, create discipline, create accountability, create leadership. Those things are intangible. You're still trying to develop in your off-season program. The thing, too, you got to look at the era in with which they were there and they were training in the bowels of Old Mountaineer Stadium. I'm sure they didn't have a strength conditioning coach per se. They didn't have a real super structured strength program. I'm sure as far as movement, as far as like trying to do speed, trying to do agility, change of direction, because 80% of the game of football is change of direction. Everyone gets caught up on all this linear speed, and we try to make them track athletes when once the ball snapped, it's 80% going side to side. But I think that I think what happened over time, when those guys, I think you've gone through pretty much 3 different segments. You think about back when they played, there's more speed, more movement. They really emphasized that. Then it shifted. Hey, let's get bigger and badder. I know when Coach Nealon, I was with him. He came in 80. I came in as 82 as a GA and 81 as a GA. And the emphasis was like, we're not getting the cream of the crop. We're lucky if we're getting a 3-star. We're not getting 4 and 5 stars. So our thing is trying to develop them physically, getting stronger, get them bigger. Hey, we'll take our chances. We'll have enough skill. Well, hopefully we got enough skill that we can match up with the other team. But in the trenches, we have to get bigger. We have to be stronger. We're not real super athletic in our trench guys. There's some exceptions, but the emphasis was more on developing more strength.
Yeah.
And of course, it shifted. From
Yeah,
that
it did. We're going to see in segment 3 here. I'm going to really want you to respond to this exergenie. Had never heard that before, and so appreciate your comments on that. Let's go to segment 3 here.
A great example of what you're saying, I think, is the fact that we never had, you walk into college practice facilities today, you see these huge weight rooms with dead weights everywhere. And we never had that. We did what was called isometrics, if you'll recall. And those were a series of resistance exercises. I'll never forget that there was one machine that had about 17 different isometric related exercises, and you were expected to make a complete route of that machine within 20 minutes. You had like 1 minute at each station, but we never got into heavy weightlifting, as I recall. You?
No, I don't, remember doing any of the, deadlifts and a lot of that stuff. I think it was all geared, as you said, we had the one machine. And then I also remember a contraption called an exergenie. It was isometrics, it was like similar to what bands are today.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's ancient. We're becoming dinosaurs talking about winter conditioning. But I think the premise is the same on what the coaches are trying to accomplish through the various circuits. I don't think this has changed since, I don't know, whenever they began the mat drills. So the mat drills about our lateral movement, our ability to react, our quickness and our lateral movement. I don't think that's ever going to go away. Mat drills.
Do you think people are still doing the Mountaineer roll?
I asked my son who played at Purdue, "Did you do mat drills?" He went, "What?" So it is what it is.
And for our viewers, let me just add that the mats that Bob's referring to were actually wrestling mats. They were 4 or 5 inch mats like you'd see in a wrestling practice ring. And we were expected to do agility drills on there. And the Mountaineer roll involved 3 guys doing a rolling and getting back up on their 4s, going under one guy, over top the other guy, all 3 guys changing positions and just making sure that you had the agility to get through that without running into one of your teammates.
And then we did front and back, where you ran in place, you bounced on, chest down, then you had to flip up and hit your shoulder blades on the back, and they had a stopwatch going. Let's see what you were doing. So the coaches, I think, maybe the first couple weeks they would explain how to do the drill properly. So they were teaching us. But I think when we got into the second set of the third 3-week period, the volume started to increase more of what we were doing.
So the exergenie there, Al, and what those guys were doing back then.
And it's amazing, but I think what's awesome, it's relative to what everyone else was doing. So it wasn't anything that was so much different, but there wasn't as great an understanding of how to develop speed and explosion. And strength. There wasn't that saying. They spoke of the exergenie about 25 or 30 years ago as a yard sale. yard sale, and I come up on this device. I look down, and lo and behold, it was an Extra Genie. I bought it. It's still in my basement now in a box. Never used it. But I think that what they're saying. I mean, you're talking about circuits. I mean, when you talk about a lot about circuit training, you're not really developing a lot of explosive power. It's more endurance training. You're developing some strength, but not a high relevance of a high volume of strength. But man, you talk about developing great toughness.
I mean, I remember Coach Tippett taking us outside, running the stadium steps, and there's snow out there. So, put a sweatshirt on and go outside, run the steps, and he had a stopwatch, 56 bleacher steps to the blue line. And if you didn't get back down at a certain time, you owed him one, So it was just the way we did it. I don't remember.
I recall that. I recall that
do.
distinctly, Bob. I tell you, Howard Tippett came to WVU. I think he came out of the University of Houston. And, the first time you encountered this guy, he looked like he was a Marine drill sergeant instructor, one of the just greatest disciplinarians, and really believed in conditioning. And if you weren't doing the mat drills correctly, or you weren't completing the isometric Extra Genie routine within the assigned time period, he'd blow his whistle. We'd all head outdoors. Snow could be falling on the old Mountaineer field. As I recall, the stadium seating went up to double T or double R. It was alphabetized. Yeah. And as you mentioned, Bob, you were expected to get all the way up to the top of those stairs and back down. I think it was 45 seconds we had to do that, right?
Yeah,
up and down.
Yeah, and if you didn't do it, you owed him one.
Oh yeah. If you didn't do it, you had to do another one. And I can distinctly recall that was, particularly. You remember the sessions on Monday, Bob, when we may have been out doing some hydrating of ourselves on the weekends. And,
all I remember was like Mondays when you went into the locker room, when everybody had a good sweat going. Okay, everybody had a good sweat going. Coach Tippett, he'd be up there, getting ready to go. We were making our run, so we get into that mat room, and they turned that heat up in there to make sure we had a good sweat going. He would take a couple deep breaths and say, "It doesn't smell right in here today. We're going to get some of the poison out of you boys today. So get ready to strap it on." And I mean, weekends were time to get hydrated a little bit because you worked so hard during the week. And then Monday came around and you were dehydrated again.
You had to dehydrate yourself.
Yeah. So,
we'd always go.
I loved him. I loved him.
We'd always go up to Pennsylvania for those hydration sessions, as I recall.
Yeah, for the real deal. Yeah, for the real deal.
The real deal was 6.0% beer up there versus 3.2 in West Virginia. Not that we ever had a beer, you understand, but just wanted to put that out.
Well, it's just part of the experience.
Great, weren't those great stories, Al, about one coach, but it could have been 100 different coaches, huh?
You know what? Nothing's changed. Hey, you could put that timeline to 2024. Hey, I guarantee on weekends after a tough week of off-season conditioning, running, etc., the guys are Friday after about 6 o'clock. They're thinking we need to go hydrate, and nothing's changed. I mean, that's what's cool. That's really what's awesome. And Mondays when they come in, they're reeked an odor that was not normally there the rest of the week,
So let's do the last part, and then we'll have Greg, if you'll bring us home after that with final comments. We'll take it from
I think
there.
our coaches set the standard very high for us. They wanted more from us as student athletes. So the bar was set early on for the training, for the practice. And even more importantly was how they stressed the academic aspect of it. Because if you remember, we got the monthly academic cards that we had to give to our various professors on the attendance, your scores, how you were doing, so on and so forth. And, fortunately, they took a genuine interest in our well-being as a student athlete to be able to, to trade off scholarship, but to play ball, you had to maintain your academic eligibility. That's why we were there. Sometimes maybe we put football a little too much, but we graduated. So, kudos to our coaches. And, even our social life on campus, being an athlete, you're kind of being recognized a little more than the average student, even though we're doing more than the average student, trying to bring honor and pride to West Virginia University. So, you had to watch your language, your behavior, make sure you're showing up in class, and do the best that you can. It was very easy to get off track during winter conditioning. We had no game scheduled, but we were always held accountable for what we were doing.
We had a dress code, as I recall. We were expected to dress a certain way out on campus. I specifically recall, Bob, that you weren't allowed to have your shirt tail out on your shirt. You expected to have your shirt tucked in when you're walking around campus. And, if you were caught not doing that, you got to go out and run those stadium steps we love so dearly. So,
Coach Carlin, they were sticklers with the sideburns.
Yeah.
You couldn't have the long hair hitting your collar. You had your hair had to be appropriate. And, God bless Coach Calicut. He called me in the training room and he pulled out a 1-foot wooden ruler and he put it at the bottom of my earlobe. And I had the sideburn come down about a ½ inch. He went and called one of the assistant trainers. He said, "Cut that sideburn off at ½ inch to get it above Zitelli's earlobe." So yeah, they had a handle on things. They really did. The conditioning, we made it through. In our minds, maybe some of us were too young to appreciate what those coaches planned out for us to lead us for success.
Watch those sideburns, I'll tell you.
It's funny you hear those things. That when I was in school, in high school, those were all things that all the coaches did back then. I mean, the dress and the hair and all that sort of thing. And I just that's all part of the discipline, obviously, and that sort of thing. But as far as the the conditioning part of it, we did isometrics, and I think that's why I have this body I have today. It's because we didn't lift any weights. We did isometrics. so I'm not sure how much good that did, but everything has changed so much, and it has become more scientific with the diets and that sort of thing, and it's just really fascinating now to see what all goes on and what all is put into that, because it's amazing when you see the science behind it and what all takes place with the conditioning, the diets, et cetera, et cetera. It's fascinating. And the end game, ultimately, running the bleachers, well, that's I'm sure was a great benefit physically. It gets you in shape, obviously, and strengthen your muscles in your legs and your lungs and all that, I'm sure. So, whether it's heavy weightlifting, that's the one thing I think has changed a lot is, they've become the bulk thing, the bigness part of it has changed a lot. Al, I wanted to ask you a question too before we move on. It seems like today there's a ton of knee injuries, and I have heard, I don't know any science behind it or anything like that, but I have heard comments about the fact that these athletes are so big and strong and fast that the body, the muscles and everything just really have a hard time keeping up with them. You know what I mean? I know it don't sound right, but that they're moving so quick and so powerful that the knees are having a hard time holding up and that sort of thing. Give us your expertise on that. I know you have thoughts and know about that. So tell us about
two
that.
things. Those are great points. One thing is you see with a lot of knee injuries is, in every injury, obviously, it's not going to be preventable. You're still going to have
Right.
it, but what you see with knees a lot of times is acceleration and deacceleration. What I'm saying is everything is moving in a linear mode, but working while you're training in the off season in terms of of sprinting and coming to a sudden stop. You find a lot of knee injuries, especially on a football field. They're happening in open space. No one's even touching the athlete, and they turn or they torque their knees, whatever. But a lot of more emphasis has been put on deacceleration to try to minimize that. But then the other thing, the good thing and I guess the great thing and maybe the bad thing about strength and conditioning coaches per se is that we've built these athletes up to be big, strong, and structurally, our body can't keep up with the amount of bulk, can't keep up with the equipment. Look at the equipment. Look at the helmets. They can't keep up with, they're trying to constantly improve. And now you see the shells now a lot of times on the practice helmets to protect them from concussions, but the equipment hasn't been able to keep up with the athletes getting bigger, getting stronger. And so something's got to give. And of course, as you see especially with injuries, it's the body. The human body. But they've gotten bigger and stronger, more explosive.
Frank, I got offline there for just a minute. I was looking for a picture that I have, and I couldn't put my fingers on it, but I have a picture when I went back up for a game. And Al, maybe you coached this guy. I'm not exactly sure when he played. I think it was the early 2000s. A fellow by the name of Quentin Spain. I have a picture of Quentin and I look like a junior high school kid in this picture. And we both played the same position 50-some years apart. I think Quentin was 6'10", and he weighed about 3. I was talking about his playing weight. I was 6'3", and I played at 230. And Bob and I and Tim Horvath were probably the 3 biggest guys on the team. But that picture of myself and Quentin Spain together, I think pretty much tells the story of what's happened in terms of the advancement that you're speaking of here, Al. So undoubtedly true. Everybody's just gotten so much bigger and faster that I think it's to be expected that you're going to have more and more injuries. It's more of a gladiator type theater now than it ever was before.
But the thing about this too, kids are coming in the last 15 years. They're coming into college now more prepared physically than they've ever been. It's not like that 17, 18-year-old skinny freshman showing up.
That's right.
Now they've all got, they got personal trainers, they've got massage therapists, they've got yoga instructor. All these things, and a lot of these things are good, they're very good, but they're more prepared physically for the initial start. Look at all the gray shirts that are coming in January. They're not even graduating with their high school classes. A lot of those kids coming in January are already prepared to.
And you're seeing in high schools. You're seeing in high schools too, more weightlifting, more
more organized, more structured, more organization. And you'll see. And look. Let's talk about one guy real quick. Leon McCoy, Winfield High School. He was one of my mentors. He was way light years ahead of the rest of the state of West Virginia as far as any type of strength training. What he did for those kids at Winfield, they won 46 consecutive games. What I'm saying, he was light years ahead of as far as strength training for the high school athlete. Probably not just West Virginia, probably in several states.
Right.
Hey, Frank, I'll wrap up my comments on this strength and conditioning aspect with a story about another guy who was on our team that was well ahead of his years when it came to building bulk, building strength. This was undoubtedly the strongest guy I've ever met in my life. His name was Dale Farley. He played outside linebacker for us. Dale came from a farm somewhere in Middle Tennessee. He passed away, unfortunately, of kidney problems about 2.5 years ago. But when Dale showed up on campus, and Dale was probably 6'4", 250, playing outside linebacker, well ahead of his time. He was the average size of one of today's outside linebackers, and just could pick up anything and just throw it over his shoulder. And the fact that he'd been raised on a farm had a lot to do with it. And I asked Dale one time, I said, Farley, how in the world did you ever get so strong? He said, well, Plumlee, he said, I'll tell you. He said, I worked on the farm a lot as a kid. And he said, when our cows would have a brand new calf born, my dad would have me pick up that calf and lift it over top a 4-foot fence and put it on the other side of the fence. And he said he'd have me do that every day of that calf's life. He said by the time that cow was full grown 565 pounds, I could still pick it up and set it over the fence. And I believed him.
Mick, we appreciate you, buddy. Take care of yourself, and we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.
I'll leave you with that, Greg.
All right, bye-bye. Frank, you want any final comments here before we're running way over here since we had the outage? Any comments you'd like to throw out there before we move on?
Appreciate, Al, always having you. What great insights.
Absolutely.
And as Mick framed it, on a topic that fans typically, when the season's over, they start thinking, okay, who are we recruiting? Important topic.
Right.
Who's going to be in the lineup? What's the spring practice look like? That all important, who we playing next year. But there's these activities that the players engage in. Coaches are very engaged. And it starts, as Mick said, not too long after the season is over. So, Al, your insights, fantastic. And Greg, your background as a coach, perfect. Really
and Frank, not sorry to interrupt, but one thing while we're thinking about this topic, and I know Al probably does the same. You look at these guys today, and you look at their size, and I'm not talking about the muscle size that they bulked up with the weights and that sort of thing. But you look at the size of these guys, like Mick said, 6'10". These guys, not all of them are that big, but 6'7", 6'6", 6'5", 300 pounds. And they can run and they can move and they're agile. And it's just amazing for folks that's never had the opportunity to see a college or a program in person and actually be close. You can't tell on TV. You get there and you see them. It is absolutely phenomenal, the size of these guys and how fast they move, how strong they are. And I just find it fascinating to hear the talk about the training and the diets and that sort of thing. And, what they can do with a person's body. But it's pretty fascinating to see these guys move and perform like they do. It's amazing. And Al, I know you feel the same way.
Well, the thing is look at the percentage of body fat. I mean, you're
Right.
talking about a kid 6'5", he's 285 pounds. He looks like he weighs 250, and he has a small waistline, lower percentage of fat, and he can run. But look at here's the thing that you cannot take for granted is the success of the program through the years at WVU. And I'm not talking about the last 3 to 5 years. I'm talking about the last 25, 30 years. Look at the evolution of the kid that you're bringing in. You got kids now. You got kids that were at West Virginia 15 years ago that may not be recruited right now because
Right.
they wouldn't fit the mold or be able to fit the scheme of what you're facing your opponents.
That's right.
Yep. Yeah, it is different. Yep. Listen, we'll sign off with that. Al, appreciate you again. Your insights are awesome. So much fun to listen to and so informative. We look forward to having you back again. We'll make sure next time though we'll leave you sitting there on the screen by yourself. We'll make sure we got somebody on standby to step in.
Hey, appreciate it. You guys have a great evening. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Al. Al
Thanks,
Johnson
Frank.
there,
Thanks,
folks.
Greg. Appreciate it.
Yep. You're welcome. Thank you. Al Johnson, the strength and conditioning coach for years and so many different places and what an expert. What a joy to listen to, Frank. I know you enjoyed that just as much as I did. And of course, Mickey and Bob and their stories, always good. Always good stuff to hear. And we thank Darryl as well. Anyway, appreciate you again putting all this together. We appreciate everybody that watched. We'll make sure again, we remind you, make sure you like and subscribe. And make sure you tune in next Wednesday night. We'll have another great show for you. We'll be letting you know through Twitter and Facebook who we're going to have on the show and what we're going to be talking about. So, Frank, I bid you farewell. Have a great evening, and we will talk to you next Wednesday. Good night, everybody.